So maybe we'll both come back on. Can you show me your video, and I'll introduce you. So welcome everybody to the first virtual career fair. We've got quite a lineup for you. Dr. Nora is coming to you from MFNERC, which is Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center, Incorporated, and that's where I work as the Career Development Facilitator. My name is Shannon Leffler, and part of the committee you the virtual career fair. Nora has had a long history in education, and she has taught overseas as well as been working with MFNERC for quite some time. She has just been appointed to the U of M board, and I'll let her jump in with her presentation. We tried to get it so that she could share her screen, because she does have a presentation for you, and yet for some reason it's not working. So I'll pass it over to Nora, and I'll turn off my microphone and video. In about 20 minutes or so, Nora, I'll just jump in and we'll see if there's any questions.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Shannon. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but that's par for the course when it comes to these kinds of things. So as usual, I'm prepared to do the presentation without the PowerPoint, and I hope that you could see me and hear my voice clearly, because I am going to just talk for about 20 minutes, as Shannon mentioned, and talk about my education journey.
We can't see you right now, so if you could share your video, that would be great.
Okay, can you see me now? Can you see me?
Can, definitely. Your okay. Beautiful artwork.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my education journey, and I know as part of this virtual career fair, it's a bit different, and I think it's the first time that I'm actually doing a presentation on virtually in terms of my career. But nevertheless, this past couple of months have been huge learning curves in terms of how we do our work. So this is just another one that I have to bear, and hopefully things will work out. Just like to thank you for coming to the presentation this morning. Thank you for honoring me with your presence. And I look forward to interacting with you for the next 20 minutes. Okay, so who I am, I'm a Cree woman from, I grew up in Misspauste Cree Nation, Grand Rapids, north of the 53rd parallel. I have band membership from Fish River Cree Nation, Ojibwe First Nation, so that's currently where I have my home. I'm a mother of two children, 19 and 29, who are both still in school. Currently, I work as the Director of Instructional Services for the Manitoba First Nation school system, which is part of the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. And just in terms of the other descriptors that I use for myself and maybe other people use for me, I'm a lifelong learner. I have 4 degrees from the University of Manitoba. I defended my thesis for my PhD in August of 2016. So that was quite a journey to get that done. And the PhD has really contributed to my current career, basically administrating and managing 11 schools that were part of our Manitoba First Nation school system. I'm also a traveler, a global citizen. I'm a board member for CUSO International, which is an organization that sends volunteers to different countries around the world. I'm an alumni. As Shannon mentioned, I wanted to travel, so I joined CUSO as a volunteer early in my career. I'll talk about that a little bit. And also I'm currently on the University of Manitoba Board of Governors. I was previously on the University of Winnipeg Board of Regents, plus a lot of other volunteer organizations and boards that I've worked on over the years. So I'm a teacher, an administrator, a leader, and an innovator. I have over 30 years experience in First Nations education. I say I'm driven to do research and to work to make things better for First Nations education. And I always clarify that when I say First Nations education, I talk specifically about the education on reserve, because that's where my passion and commitment is. So in terms of how I got here, I think I'll tell you a little story that began long time ago, when I was younger, in my 20s and earlier, and even before that. So I grew up in northern Manitoba, and my father was an outdoorsman. He was a hunter and a trapper and a commercial fisherman all his life. So both my parents never went beyond elementary school. But for some reason, my father really believed in education, that he promoted education, he promoted learning in whichever way that we can. He promoted formal education, even as growing up in the North himself and growing up in an isolated community and not having that formal education experience himself. He really promoted education, and right from when I was very young, I was an avid reader. I read so many books, any books that I could get my hands on, even though we had a small library. I read almost every book in the library, I think. And, in those days, way back in those days, we had something called the University Extension Library, where we could order books online, and they would ship them out every couple of weeks. And so I would receive these books in a brown package and then read them and then send them back. So in those books, I read all the classics, like all the different books I read about, like Stonehenge and all these different places around the world. And I always wanted to travel, so that reading those books put a desire in me to travel. So when I finished high school, I went on to the University of Manitoba, and I decided to take a Bachelor of Arts in English literature. So that's what I did. But one day in my third year of my degree, I was in University Center, and I saw a sign on the bulletin board, and it said "Teach Overseas" in bright blue letters. I could still envision that poster that said "Teach Overseas," and it really sparked my interest. So it turned out that it was a CUSO poster, and they were requesting volunteers to go and teach overseas. So right then and there, I found what I wanted to do. So in those days, I could complete my Bachelor of Arts, and then I could do a 2-year certificate in education. So that's what I did. And so then, as soon as I got my certificate in teaching, I applied to CUSO. And so I went to teach overseas in West Africa. And so that, I was there for 2 years in Nigeria. I taught at a teacher's college. And I always say that particular experience really influenced my life in many, many ways. When I talk about global citizenship, that's, that experience, really opened up my eyes. And actually didn't just open up my eyes, it opened up the eyes of my family and all those that I shared my experience with, that it's not a big world, it's a small world. And, that we're all human beings. And, in this time of racial tension, like one of the important lessons I learned from there is that, and I have a stock answer in terms of my experience overseas. And I always say, what I learned, the biggest lesson I learned there is that no matter what kind of culture or what kind of worldviews, what kind of food you eat, what the color of your skin, it doesn't matter, that we are all human beings, that we all bleed red blood, we all cry salty tears, and we're so alike in so many ways. And, we need to look at that rather than the differences. So that was just my little story about how it all started and how I got into education in the first place. It was that poster on the wall, that kind of provided that impetus for me to go on and to get my teaching certificate, and then to go on and get my master's degree in education, and also then my PhD, all related to education and specifically related to working with First Nations on reserve education. So that's currently where I still am. That's where my focus is, working with the First Nations on reserve system. With MFNERC, like we work with all the band operated schools, and with MFNSS, we work specifically with 11 partnering communities that I work very closely with. So in terms of my work currently, I provide leadership to to promote educational objectives of MFNSS. We plan to administer programs of educational activities for the teachers and staff of our MFNSS schools. We provide leadership to ensure accountability measures are developed and implemented for strategies, proposals, work plans, budgets, and reports. So all those different things, anything related to working with, with individual schools, but also, as a collective, we work with all 11. So it's basically leadership in educational administration, which I really enjoy. And I got into educational administration very soon in my career, like out of the 30 or so years that I've been in education, about 3/4 of those years have been in admin, so I taught for a few years. I taught quite a few grades, but I did get it into ed admin very early in my career. So I worked as a vice principal, principal, a director of education, and now a director of instructional services. So so it's been quite the journey, and some of the, maybe how did I get there was one of the questions. And I think that whole idea of, like I could talk about, like cliches or, work hard and you'll get there, set goals and everything. But, in terms of how I got to be where I am, I think it is like setting those goals for yourself to make sure that you have, a vision for your own life, and to know what you want out of your life, and to continue to learn all through, as much as possible, like learn what you can when you can. To me, it's learning is just an ongoing process, and there's formal learning, but there's also learning that you get from other people around you, like elders and different people that can teach you, and you can learn from others. So setting goals for sure, working hard, and dedicating yourself to achieving those goals, and perseverance. And I have 2 children who are still in school, and I always tell them the same thing. Like, my son will be graduating with his physical therapy, master's in physical therapy this fall, and my daughter is still in college in BC. And I always tell them the same thing, that that we face these challenges, but I use this phrase, rising above, all the time. That means that we experience different things, different challenges in life, but we rise above, and they know what that means. That means not letting it bring you down, that whatever happens, the challenges, and giving up, you want to give up, things are difficult, but I always tell them, nothing in life that's worth achieving is easy. So difficulty and challenges are a part of life, but you just rise above those challenges. And and again, I keep bringing up this racism because that's kind of a forefront in the news today. But both of them have experienced racism, and I say, well, just rise above, and don't stoop down to that level, and power. I talk about powering through those challenges. Like, we all have inner strength, inner power, and we just draw upon those things that we were taught, those values, and the gifts that we have to really draw from within and power through those challenges, and to rise above people or things that will bring you down. And the other thing I always say is that whoever said life was going to be easy, that we embrace challenges, we embrace problems and difficulties, but there's always a solution and a way to get over that. So that's kind of the way that I look at things in terms of the challenges that I faced over the years and continue to face. And I think one of the questions that was possibly a point for discussion here was, what were the most challenging things? And maybe I'll just mention very briefly, like as a woman in leadership, that I faced some of those maybe some of those attitudes that we shouldn't be there. But we've come a long way since the 80s when I first got into leadership, because I remember when I first became a principal, and the vice principal was a male. So I remember this one person would always come into the school and would say, "I want to see the principal." And then, of course, I would go to the front and say, "I'm the principal." And he would say, "I want to see the real principal," talking about the male vice principal. So just that he didn't want to acknowledge me as a person in authority. So those kind of things, like I've faced over the years, but again, like I didn't let that bring me down. And things have changed quite a bit in since then, and women are stronger and women are having more of a voice, and we've come a long ways. So I've seen those changes, and we get a lot more respect in terms of women in leadership, and a lot more supports. And maybe the other challenge that I'll briefly talk about is the life-work balance. That it's important as women, as people, as men, whatever gender we are, that we always consider that life-work balance. That we can't let work consume our lives. That we always have to balance it out with leisure and with exercise and well-being. Again, every time I say that, I say, Nora, take your own advice. To always remember that we need that life-work balance, and that we need to maintain our health, and if we're going to help others and be productive in the work that we do, that we need to always remember that life-work balance. And I shared that not too long ago at a conference that I went to, and I talked about how I learned that lesson a couple of years ago when I did get sick, because I didn't consider that enough. So I've learned my lesson, and just like to remind all of us that we always need to consider that. So I'm not sure, I'm not even keeping track of the time here, but
I just kind of jumped in because I was just wondering if anybody had any questions. And I mean, you've had quite a life journey and a lot of education, and have done, I guess, what people would say so well for yourself, to have journeyed through the years in your education, with you mentioned 4 degrees. Can you expand a little bit on how you managed to earn 4 degrees and have a family and travel overseas and come into the position where you are now, and what your day looks like? I guess it's a little bit different now that COVID has having us all work from home, and yet what might that day have looked like before, and what do you think it might look like after?
yeah, well, one of my slides is a day in the life. So I just put, like recently, like that nowadays, that it's a lot of Zoom meetings, GoToMeetings, WebEx meetings, Microsoft Team meetings, all kinds of meetings like that. So almost every day there's, 3 or 4, sometimes 5 meetings on different things. Like, say, for example, like this morning, I was on a meeting with IBM consultants, and we're talking about strategic planning for our school system. Like, we have had a strategic plan, but we just learned from IBM, and one of the superintendents, a retired superintendents, is sharing their ideas on, their experiences working in the school division, and how strategic planning, how they do it in the school division. So I was on there for a couple of hours today, and then I also go on meetings with provincial superintendents, like just to see what they're doing in terms of the COVID crisis and school opening and things like that. Yesterday, for 3 hours, we're almost 3 hours, 2.5 hours, I think. We were on a meeting with all our MFNSS principals and education directors, and that was a Zoom meeting. So, it really works well, and I'm really appreciative of the technology that we had. Had a principal from York Factory and Fox Lake, way up north, isolated communities, and they're able to connect and we're able to have a good, a good meeting, a good conversation and dialogue in regards to the response to COVID and what's happening with our schools. So even though they are remote, that we're still able to communicate and, just have that sharing in terms of how we respond to this crisis currently and just some of the plans for September. So we do a lot of planning, strategic planning sessions, and we're currently working on an annual report, for example, that every year we do a report about for our 10 schools. So we're currently working on that. So quite a few meetings. Like we meet with a lot of different. I don't like the word stakeholders, but different groups of people that are support for us, and a lot of reports and documents and planning sessions, I guess, and just maintaining that ongoing communication, because communication is so important to to any work that we do. So but prior to Zoom, of course, same kind of interaction, but face to face. A lot of different meetings we say, but that's how we get things done. And it's good to work with a group of people within our office and within our schools, the principals and education directors that just have the same kind of commitment and passion that I have for education. So it's really exciting. Every day is challenging. Every day is inspiring. I say that honestly. And even though I've been in this field for quite a long time, and believe me, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be here. But every day is really, I find it inspiring and exciting. So every day is a challenge and every day is exciting for me.
Thank you. You mentioned you have a few degrees. Would you mind expanding on those degrees and where maybe you went to university and how that's helped your education journey?
Okay, well, my first, like as mentioned, all my most of my post-secondary education has been at the University of Manitoba. I went for a Bachelor of Arts first of all because I really, again, I mentioned that I was an avid reader, so I got a degree in majoring in English literature. So asked me about Shakespeare, and actually took a whole course on Shakespeare. So just that English literature degree, Bachelor of Arts. And then I went on to education. I majored in elementary education for my education degree, and then I went for a couple of years in between there. I went to University of British Columbia because I did take some courses in teaching English as a second language prior to going overseas, and that really helped me a lot to to be able to work with non-English speakers, and because I did teach English, like how to speak English when I went overseas. So I did a couple of years over there at UBC, and then I came back and did a master's degree in education in ed admin, and then I went on for my PhD. And I have to say that for the master's degree and the PhD, I did all of it part-time, and I didn't take any time off work. I managed to work part-time. Work part-time on the degree, but work full-time all the way through. I think I might have taken maybe 3 months off to do the thesis writing, but other than that, I worked all the way through. So that was when I finished my PhD in 2016. I didn't really want to open another book for a couple of years. I didn't really want to do any writing for a couple of years because it was very difficult and very challenging. But again, because I worked full time during that time, it was evenings and early mornings and weekends, and for 9 years, it took me 9 years to complete my PhD part time. But it was worth it. There's many times I thought of giving up, but then, I'm so close to completing the goal. I'll just power through and, just keep going. And I was really relieved when I was finally finished to earn that degree. And, it was it was not for any kind of recognition, but just a personal goal that I had, for my satisfaction, knowing that I achieved that goal of, achieving that degree, and I'm really thankful that I was able to complete it, and, proud of myself. If no one else is, I'm proud of myself that I was able to complete that degree. And, and it took me a long time to be able to relax on a weekend, maybe over a year. I said, oh, I could actually watch Netflix and binge watch. Before I couldn't do that, or actually I could actually read a nonfiction or a fiction book, and not be guilty about it. So it's I think it's worth it to get your degrees. Even though some people say it's just paper, but again, I think it's really important that we are recognized as First Nations Indigenous peoples, that we have the capabilities, that we have the ability to do whatever we want, that we have the ability to make a real difference in our field. And we have those gifts, and we need to be able to share them. And sometimes a degree gives you that extra bit of push in terms of being credible. Unfortunately, we need that. So
Thank you
that.
for sharing.
Mhm.
I appreciate that because I'm working on my social work degree via distance ed with the U of M in the evening. So I understand the not necessarily wanting to read unless it's because you're having to read for lots of other reasons, not pleasure.
Exactly. Hmm.
Anyways, thank you so much for sharing. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Dr. Nora about her journey? And that's okay if you don't. I just so appreciate you having shared with us and having you come on.
Could I
Um,
see? Could I see the people, or is it just
they have we have their cameras off. If they
okay?
would like to show, because we've had people kind of coming in and out,
Okay.
and that if people would like to show their camera, they are more than welcome to. Just
Okay.
if she could, she could say hi.
Well, I'll say hi anyway. I just feel like I'm talking to Shannon and talking to the computer screen. But those of you who are out there, Elena, I see, and Cherise and Marie and all these different people. Hello and thank you for coming to the session. I hope that you're able to take something away. And I'm not sure who even the audience is in terms of if it's young people.
It's a very wide variety of people. I can tell. Just I know some of them. We've had some youth, and we had one of your employees. She came on, and there's a little conversation bar, and she just said Nora is an amazing director at the MFNSS, and as a new employee, she has made me feel so welcomed. I just wanted to say a Cozy for sharing her journey. She truly is a great leader.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So as I said, there's a wide variety of people, and I guess it's time to bid adieu and say thank you very much, and thank you for all who joined this first um, virtual career fair.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you for everybody for coming to the session. Thank you, Shannon, and all the people who organized this. I think it's a great. It seems like a very great event, and um, I don't know if it's the first time that it's been done, but for sure, I think it's a really great event, and hopefully it'll people will learn and people will be able to share ideas and collect ideas to help them in their own journeys.